Chris Heller, the home seller. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. How are you, Kevin?
Doing good, man. So this one is fun for me because one of the things I love about being able to do this podcast is interviewing people that I know personally as well as professionally, and I've gotten to know you in both ways over the last decade or so since I first met you, and I've been a student of your career, and so it's fun for me to be able to kind of chat with you and share some of the stories I've heard before with the rest of our Next Level podcast listeners. So thanks a lot for being here today, Chris.
Hey, my pleasure. It's always fun.
Cool. So do me.
I guess we do know each other because I was just texting you last night about, we have similar music tastes. So
Yeah, and it was funny. Well, what was funny is there's someone else on that text string, and you had texted me about music, which that's usually just you and me, right? And so I was thinking like, well, now he knows that we sit around and basically text about the Dodgers or music or some other sport or event that we want to go to. So I was laughing at that.
Yeah.
So do me a favor. Take me back to the beginning of your real estate career. When did you get licensed, and what made you kind of decide to pursue the path of a business in the real estate world?
So I never had an interest in getting into real estate. I had an interest in real estate. When I was a little kid, my grandfather, who was a pharmacist, invested in real estate and developed and built apartment buildings. And he'd build them and rent them all out and then sell them and do it again. And then when I was in college, my freshman year, me and my dad bought a house in the town in San Luis Obispo. I was going to Cal Poly, and just as an investment, we hired a contractor, he built the house, and then we flipped it. And then at the end of my sophomore year, my dad said, "Hey, you're going to get your real estate license and come up here and work for the summer." And he was up in Lake Tahoe, and he was managing a timeshare resort. So I was like, okay. So school got out. He had an apartment in San Francisco he had just moved out of, and was up in Lake Tahoe. So I went in this empty apartment, spent 2 weeks there by myself and studied every day, did a 2-day crash course, and then on the following Monday went in, took the test, passed the test, and then went up to Lake Tahoe and started selling timeshares. So that was 1983 that I got my real estate license, and I was 20 years old. Later that summer, he got an opportunity to go to San Diego to run a resort, and I went with him because I was still out of school for the summer. And then I never left. I just stayed in San Diego and then transferred schools but was working full time. About 3 years into selling timeshares, I remember this vividly. I was at this resort in Carlsbad, and the lobby was 2 stories. It was the end of the day. Most people had gone home, and I was standing up on the second story, looking down in the lobby, just leaning on the railing, and this nice looking couple walked in. And in my head, I was like, okay, there's my next sale. So I go down and start talking to him. And the guy owned a real estate company up the street. And he said, "Hey, I want to own one of these, but I don't want to write you a check. I want you to come and present this to all my agents. And as they send you referrals, you apply those to me owning one of these." So I said, okay. So I went to his office, and I'm like 20 years old, and go into this real estate office and present to all these people, and for the next 3 years, that broker would call me, write me handwritten notes. Every time he saw me, he tried to get me to come work for him. You need to be in real estate. You need to come work for me. This went on for 3 years, and I ended up starting my own marketing company and leased an office and used him to handle that. And I had a partner, and the business went like this and then like that because my partner went off the deep end, and I didn't know how to handle my partner. And so I went back to him and said, "Hey, that company's closing down. I'm going to start off on my own. I need a new office." And we sat there in his office, and I went in to talk to him about leasing a new office, and he basically convinced me to get into real estate. And finally I said, all right, fine, I'll try it. And so I got talked into getting into real estate.
That's pretty funny. So let me ask you this, just because I know bits and pieces of it, and please fill me in where I'm wrong. But so phone calls, handwritten notes over a 3-year period of time, that sounds to me a lot like what I've heard about the legend of Chris Heller and how he grew his real estate business, right? And so is that where, did you pick that up from him? Did you?
Absolutely. He taught me the importance of being persistent, of being consistent, of the handwritten notes. When I went to work for him, I didn't know anything about real estate, and he was an ex-Marine, and so he woke up early and got in the office early. So all I knew is that I would be there before he got there, and I'd be the first one in and the last one out. So that was my only. I didn't have any skills, experience, knowledge, intelligence. I had nothing other than, okay, I can work longer and harder than anyone. So I would get there like at 6 in the morning because he got there like at 6:30, which is crazy. I don't know why he got there at 6:30. I don't know why I got there at 6. But yeah, I'd be doing my handwritten notes every day and making my calls and prospecting, and that's just all I did all day long. I didn't have anything else to do.
That's awesome. I love that fact that, especially early on in the career, you realize like, hey, if I don't have an appointment, I probably shouldn't be doing anything other than something that could get me an appointment, right? That's
yeah,
what I
he'd
think I
say
just
all
heard.
the time. He'd say, hey, you can't sell houses sitting in the office, so get out there and find someone. And so that's what I do.
Love that. So I'm going to fast forward the story a little bit because there's so many pieces here that I want to touch on. But so tell me about you. You and I had a conversation one time, you, me, and another guy, Seth, and we were talking about how you kind of got it started in investing in real estate and other businesses, and not just relying on I'll call it your realtor income. What can you just kind of tell me what that process was? And because I remember that you had a method to it, and I'm curious, do you still use that method or something similar to that today?
Yeah. So what I shared with you is I'd read early in my career. I always read and continue to read a lot of books, and the book that I had read way back then was called The Richest Man in Babylon. And part of that story, he talks about how he was taught to save 10% of all his earnings to save up money and to be able to use that to invest or create wealth. So I read that book and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do 15% because that's better than 10, and I'll get to where I want to go faster. So I literally took every commission I got, 15% of it went into a separate account, an account I didn't touch. And sometimes I'd have the escrow company just cut 2 checks for me, or if it was the broker, or if it was one check to me, my bookkeeper would always cut a check for 15%, to a separate account. And no matter what, I paid myself that. Even on months where I didn't have the money, there were many conversations I had with my bookkeeper where she'd say, hey, we can't do the 15% this month. And I said, well, why? What do we? And she goes, well, you have this doctor bill and you got this orthodontist bill for, your kids and blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, at the bottom of the orthodontist bill, what does it say? She said, nothing. I said, well, aren't there things that say, 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, how many days you're behind? And she said, yeah. I go, well, then don't pay it. Wait till it's 90 days if we have to, but, pay me first, and then we'll figure out, I'll make the money to pay the other stuff. So I was that disciplined about it.
Okay, so I want to keep going on the story, but before I do, I kind of have an interjection question. Was it harder to do that when the money was small, or when you started selling a lot of real estate and the numbers got big?
No, I think it was harder when it was small, because it was literally, how am I going to do this, or where's the money going to come from, or I can't spend any money, on this, or we can't go do that because the money wasn't there. When the money is big, obviously it's a bigger amount, but it actually feels better because you're like, okay, now I'm putting away a decent chunk.
That's cool. Okay. So you're probably frustrating your bookkeeper because you are going against all things rational, and potentially going 90 days late on a bill in order to pay yourself first and build up your retirement and your investment and your wealth account. So how did that proceed? Tell me kind of what happens next in the story.
So I kept doing that, and when I'd moved to San Diego right before my 21st birthday, I bought a townhome because I was making good money selling timeshares, and um, and then a few years later sold it and bought a house, and then got married, and then sold it and bought another house. So I kept doing the normal thing, but I wasn't making enough. And in San Diego, as it is today, prices were always
Hi.
much higher than high and higher than the rental amounts were. So the broker that I worked for when I first met him, he owned a coin laundromat and a self-service car wash, car wash. And I was like, and I would go with him some days when I'd collect the quarters. And I was like, I need one of these. This is like a cool thing that you can own, and it just makes money for you while you're not there. So I kept telling him, hey, if you find another one, I'll go in with you. And I kept I always was bringing it up to him. So one day he calls me, this is several years later, and says, hey, you always said you wanted to own one of these type of businesses. I go, yeah. He goes, well, I got one. It's a really good one, but the seller won't pay me a commission, so you have to pay me, if you buy it. I go, done. If I buy it, and it's a good deal, I'm happy to pay you. So he brought it to me. It was one where he used to be one of the owners and had been bought out by the current guy. Anyways, it was a great business. I think the price, this was like in 96. I think it was 650,000. And the guy wanted, it was either 200 or 250,000 down. And I had been saving up this 15%. So I had this chunk of money. I had about 150 saved up, and so I needed another 100. And I think I was closing in September. Yeah, it was September. I was at the Mike Ferry Superstar Retreat in August, and I was like 100,000 short, or I was going to be 100,000 short. So I knew a lot of people there. I knew a lot of great agents. So and there was one agent broker that I really respected, and I asked him if he'd loan me 100,000, and I'd be willing to cross collateralize it against multiple pieces of real estate that I owned, and here's how I'm going to pay you back, and blah blah blah. And he said okay. And what's funny is that month I had a huge month, and I made like 110,000 in real estate commission, and didn't need to borrow the money from him, and bought this coin laundromat that I still own today. And
that's awesome.
But I was only able to do that because of that money I saved up. Same thing happened a few years later. There was a real estate opportunity where there was this hill in my area that I used to say, I'd drive up there sometimes, and there was nothing up there, and I'd say, if I ever won the lottery, this is where I'd build the house. And one day I'm watching the MLS, and these 7 lots hit the MLS, and I'm like, where are they? I'm looking where I go, oh my God, this is it. This is that hill. They're selling these lots on this hill. So I drove up there, called the agent, said, hey, I want to buy one of these. And she says, well, you better bring me a check, to my office, and because I'm getting tons of calls. And so I called my neighbor and a friend of mine and told them about it. Like, between there and this Coldwell Banker office, I had 3 of them sold, 1 for me and 2 to other people. But again, I was only able to buy and build that house because of the same practice of accumulating and saving money that way.
That's awesome. Hey, is this the hill that I could see from that restaurant that we had breakfast at or lunch at last summer in Encinitas?
No, it's right. It's near there. It's Lucadia. It was this little cul-de-sac street with like 7 or 8 lots on it. one of my neighbors was Tony Hawk, the skateboarder.
Oh, wow.
The other one was the lead singer from the band Blink 182. And then this surgeon, and then this real estate agent.
That's so funny. Oh man, I feel like real estate agents, we always find our ways into the funniest circles. You know, that's pretty, I feel like that's typical. So like in a funny way. So that's really cool. So, okay. So I'm going to fast forward the story a little bit because there's a lot here that you've got going on in your career. So you obviously built a humongously massive team. You ended up owning real estate brokerages yourself as investments and businesses. And you eventually started going down the path of leadership as well as investing into businesses. And so we could start with either one of those. Is there something specifically that led you to go down either one of those paths? You know, and when I say investments, obviously you've always been doing that, but I also know that you've diversified, and you're like me, you love learning about new technologies and new companies. You and I have had plenty of conversations about, you know, cryptocurrency to laundromats, you know, so basically every kind of investment business there is. I'd love to hear kind of some of your thoughts on what led you to some of these other investments that you've made or opportunities that you've taken from whether leadership perspective at Keller Williams, like worldwide, or, you know, in any other roles that you've had.
Yeah, you know, Kevin, I never had like a plan I had lots of plans, but I never had like a leadership plan. Like, you know, I want to be this, I want to become that. I had a feeling that everything I was doing was preparing me for something bigger and greater. And I also always operated and still do, that if I do a good enough job and get big enough results, that opportunities will present themselves. And so I've always operated that way. And, you know, through the success I was having as an agent, through the success I was having as you know, launching Market Center and building Market Center, and that Keller Williams saw that and saw what I was doing, and then approached me about, you know, whether I'd be interested in joining the international company and helping them. The first job was to help them expand, you know, Keller Williams around the world. It was nothing that I had ever thought of, nothing that I had ever, you know, and would never have approached them about. But you know, they saw that in me, and that opportunity presented itself, and then I jumped at it, and I jumped at it just because it seemed like a really challenging thing to do, and it was like, okay, this is as close to impossible without being impossible that I can imagine right now. So yeah, I'm interested.
So yeah, that's something I've noticed with you. You definitely are looking for a challenge. Something, I'm going to ask you a question. You might remember this, but last year at the Next Level Agents conference, we had a kind of a mastermind VIP dinner the night before. And one of the questions that was asked of all of us there was, what's the thing that makes you weird or makes you different than everybody else that, you know, probably helps, it's what helps you be who you are, right, and accomplish the things. And I remember your answer, but I'd like to ask you that a question again. So what's the thing, Chris, that you think it's weird to the rest of the world? Like they may, if they realize you do it, they may go, huh? And, but you know, it's one of the things where it has helped you get to where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because just like within the last few days, I was thinking about that dinner, but I couldn't remember where it was or why I was at it. So now I remember it was at your conference. And I don't remember that. I remember that question being asked. I don't remember the answer that I gave. And so I'll tell you what I think it might have been, and then you can tell me if this is the right answer or the same answer. And I don't even know, I don't think this was the answer I gave, but this is what just popped into my head when you just asked it now. and that is that, and this is even weird for me to say, is I am, uh, I am probably most comfortable when I am, uh, when I am at, or let me say it this way, comfortable. I like at heart, I am a warrior, and uh, and so there needs to be a good battle to be fought and a worthy one for me to go do something. And so that's just what went through my head now. I don't, and I don't think that was the answer I gave back then. So you can tell me what answer I gave then.
You know, I'm wondering if I had it mixed up, because there was another question that was asked of those in the room, which was, what's your superpower?
Yeah.
And I may be mixing the two up at this point, but one of the things that stuck out to me is you said something to the effect of, I just literally don't know how to quit. If I said, you know, if I'm going to do something, you know, I will do it, and I will keep running at it and trying different ways of accomplishing it. But the word quit just doesn't really show up for me, because if it's possible for me to attain something, which now hearing the story about Worldwide makes sense to why you took that, because you went, well, this is gonna be really, really hard. I don't even know how I can do it, but I do think it's possible. So I totally see that now. But that was one of the things that stuck out to me is just your superpower and your weirdness of, like, yeah, I kind of just get up and go. And I think a lot of people who maybe don't know you as well as I do, Chris, can look at you and go, okay, well, you're obviously really smart, really successful, but I don't think a lot of people realize what makes you tick. And one thing that's clear to me is, you know why you're doing things, and you know what that cause is that you're, you know, fighting for, if you will, or working for. And when you put your mind to something, it's kind of like you're just going to do it till you get there. It's almost like the time, you know, if you think about SMART goals, like the T is for time, you kind of almost don't care about the time, because you're just going to get there when you get there.
Yeah, I don't, yeah, and I don't, like probably a lot of us, I don't think about myself a lot. Like, I think I have a pretty high level of self-awareness, but I don't spend a lot of time like analyzing myself. But yeah, I remember Gary Keller saying to one of the board members, and then the board member relaying to me, like Gary saying, Chris is one of the most resilient people I've ever met. Like the guy is resilient. Doesn't matter how many times you knock him down, he gets up. And then I look back and go, yeah, that's a consistent theme, you know, in my life.
Did you learn that from someone, or like a mentor, or is that just sort of how you've shown up and you've realized that's been one of your keys to success?
No, I don't think I learned that from someone. I think it just, you know, there's things that happen when you're little kids, and that sort of shapes you, and so there was just a lot of things that happen, I think, that just sort of shape that.
Okay.
And uh, and so I've just always, that's just been one of the ways I've won,
Cool.
is
Like,
just, you know, I remember my best friend many years ago said, if we're picking teams, I'd pick Chris, not because he's the most talented. In fact, he's not even close, but he has the most heart.
what are friends for, right?
Yeah.
Let me compliment you while making sure I can take a little dig.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because you and I have talked about different books over the years and given each other books, you know, that had made an impact on us, or that we thought the other might like. If you had to name just one, and if you can't name one, if you got to do two or three, that's fine. What's the book that's either had the biggest impact on you, or that you've maybe gifted the most to others because you hoped it would make an impact on them?
So there's been a lot of them, but if you put it in that way, so the ones I've gifted the most, or so there's probably two that stick out, and it's funny because um, they're both from a long time ago. And one was The Psychology of Winning by Dennis Waitley. And I saw him speak. I was in my early 20s, and I somehow ended up in this place where he was speaking. I was in the front row, and um, and I don't, in my mind there was no one else in the room. There was just him and me, um, and he said a lot of things that day that just like you know, it was like a lightning bolt hitting me. In fact, I remember one of the things he said. So I'm going to write up 10 two-letter words, and the 10 two-letter words he wrote up on the board, I think it was a chalkboard back then, was if it is to be, it is up to me. And what that meant to me was I'm responsible. I'm responsible for everything, good, bad, and ugly that happens. And that was empowering, an empowering thought. The other book that comes to mind is um, by Mike Harnacki, and the title I think is I'm probably messed up. I think it's The Secret to Getting Anything You Want, or I think it's called I think The Secret is in the title. The Secret, or How to Get Everything You Want, or The Secret to Getting Whatever You Want. But if you Google it or look on Amazon, Mike Harnacki, I think it's Harnacki or something like that.
I'll look it up and add it to the show notes. That's cool. One thing I know about you is you walk most places when given the opportunity. Your health is, you're very careful about what you eat or drink, and obviously that shows. Like, tell me, what's the deeper thing there? Is that something that you've always done? Is it something that you do because you have to be sharp for business and the stuff that I know you like to experience life, you like to do things? And is it a combination of that? Like, where did that come from for you?
Yeah, I think it came from a couple of places. I have early memories. We lived in this one house till I was 6 years old, so I know I was below the age of 6. And I remember sitting on the floor, and my mom standing there with a chair, and she's watching Jack LaLanne, and she's doing the exercises, watching the TV. And I don't know how many episodes of Jack LaLanne I watched, and how many times I heard him say the things he said, but I think it was like a lot. And so from early on, you are what you eat, and all those things that he used to say and do, and I think were were embedded in me. And then I think the other thing that I bought a car when I was 16, and I'd saved up my money, and my parents were moving away, and I wasn't going to move with them, so I needed a car, and that's a whole nother story. But and I remember learning about the different types of oil and the different grades of gasoline that you could put in a car. And I had this immediate connection that if I'm going to put the best gas and the best oil in my car, and I need to do the same thing with my body. Like, this is the only one I got. So why would I put anything but the best type of stuff into it? And so early on, I was shopping at a health food store when I was in high school, and I think back and go, that was really weird. Now I did some other things that weren't healthy, but I overall was very aware about what I consumed.
Nice. Okay.
And then working out, I always worked out. I think in junior high school, I got a weight set for Christmas, and so I was always the little kid in the neighborhood that had a bicep before the others.
Love it. All right. So when it comes to, I'm gonna do rapid fire because I know we're running short on time. Paper calendar or electronic?
Um, can you see it on the wall behind me? Okay.
Yeah, this was an ad hoc question. I thought of it about 15 minutes ago when I was like, he's got a calendar behind him.
I use both, but I'm visual, so it's really helpful for me to be able to take a glance and see what I have coming up in 3 months, or if someone says, "Hey, you want to go do this on Labor Day?" I can look and see.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the Gorge. I've never been there myself.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, that reminds me. So next question, what was the best concert you went to in 2000, just call it the last year?
Oh, I went to a lot last year. I don't know that I can say best. I mean, we went to Nine Inch Nails, and
That was awesome.
I really like that. The Foo Fighters would have been way up there, but it was so loud, it was almost distracting. So but it was really good. Yeah, I saw U2 a couple times, Imagine Dragons, A1 Nation, 21 Pilots, and several others I'm sure I'm not remembering. But it's rare for me to go to a concert that where I go, oh, that wasn't very good. I mean,
Yeah.
I just like going to them. I even went to an Andrea Bocelli concert last year.
Thank you, Nina.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, so if it weren't for Nina, that wouldn't have happened. But I was surprised how much I enjoyed it. It was very cool.
Maybe we'll do a part 2 one day, and I'll have you tell the story of getting off the train and realizing Marilyn Manson was playing across the street. We'll do that. We'll do that at the follow-up interview, because I got a few other questions I want to ask. But I wanted to ask that because I know music's such a big part of your life. You and I went to some pretty amazing concerts together last year and separately, and I feel like that's one of the things that we always talk about because it's I think we both just draw so much out of live music.
Yeah.
So play fantasy football still?
Yes.
How long have you been doing that?
Well, so I'm in multiple leagues, but one of them, this was our 27th or 28th year.
Whoa, that's awesome.
Pre-internet. This was back when we had to clip the box scores out of the newspapers.
That's awesome. I'll tell you, the reason I asked the fantasy football question, obviously I knew the answer, but number 2 is, for me, business-wise, I actually learned a lot of lessons about business from playing fantasy sports. I personally had to give up fantasy baseball if I was going to ever be in business, because it's like a job for 9 months a year with the daily lineups and the pitching changes, et cetera. But I'll tell you, I remember thinking, man, if I could put this much effort as I do into my fantasy teams into some sort of business, I probably would be pretty good at it.
Yeah.
And because it's numbers and it's equations and it's predicting what's gonna happen based off of previous results, and so it's kind of like a system. So
yeah, it also shows you what the power of doing something that you're interested in or that you have a passion for.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Okay, back to I'm gonna go real estate specific here. Best piece of advice you could give to somebody who's a real estate agent now, 2019 and beyond, because obviously the landscape is changing. iBuyers, disruptors, acquisition, all the things that are a lot of noise, I'll say, in our industry these days. And for someone, whether they're new or experienced, they come to you and say, Chris, man, this is how I make my money. What do I need to be doing? What should I be focused on here in 2019 and going forward?
Okay, so the bulk of the disruption or the would-be disruptors is driven by consumer behavior, and technology has shaped consumer behavior, and now consumer behavior is shaping technology, and that behavior that we all participate in is, we want things easy, we want things predictable, we want things fast, we want them transparent, we want certainty. And it's absolutely critical that agents provide that and figure out how to provide that. And it doesn't have to be, and we should leverage technology to do that, but it's not reliant upon technology. It's just really upping the game that we play, the communication game, the setting expectation game, the level of service and experience we provide to clients needs to meet and exceed their expectations, and understanding that expectations are much different now than they used to be.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact quote. I wish I had looked this up before we hopped on today, but I had written it down. Actually, somebody had taken notes I don't know if it was a mastermind or a class that you had presented on in a year or two ago. And it was essentially like good customer service. It's no longer about good customer service. It's about the customer experience or something to that effect. And I remember reading that. I was like, wow, Chris really nailed it there. I wish I'd been at that class that day. So that lines up, I think, with what you're just saying. Okay, next question. This is one I ask everybody the same question is, top three pieces of advice for just kind of kicking more ass in general, whether that be business, work, life, family, personal. Someone comes to you care about them, or you have some sort of maybe mentor relationship with them, and they just say, hey, Chris, what are the top three things I should really focus on to be better in life?
Yeah. I don't know if these are the top three things, but these are the top three that are coming to mind. Just do the right thing. Just always do the right thing. Secondly, be willing to do whatever it takes. Having the willingness, which is sort of the punchline of that second book that I mentioned. And it doesn't mean, so obviously that's within the constructs of what's legal and moral and all those things. But having the willingness to do whatever it takes is such a big piece of what I believe it takes to be successful. And then one of my mentors early on said this so many times, it always pops into my head when I get questions like this, and that is, show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and don't be attached to the outcome. And that, I heard that so many times and put that into practice as best I could every day. And that was really powerful advice.
I think it's that last part, that don't be attached to the outcome, that is a struggle for most. I know for me too, it is, even though I'm willing to do repetitive things, even though I get bored, but I still will do repetitive things. And it's something I see with a lot of folks in our industry, and I'm sure outside too, that it's that outcome is, I think if I did X, why don't I get Y? And it's just one of the things I've always tried to stress to myself and to the agents around me is, what? Just because we do the right thing today doesn't mean it's necessarily going to come back from that. Like, you could make your 20, 25 contacts today, right? It doesn't mean one of those 25 contacts are buying or selling real estate with you in the next year even. It might just be the random phone call you get that night because you put activity into motion.
Yeah.
So I think that not being attached to the outcome is really important. And it's a theme that I've seen come up over and over, because we can't control that outcome. What we can control, though, is ourselves. Yeah,
and it allows us to be much more powerful when we're not attached to the outcome. Because when you're attached, someone else or something else has power over you, and that's, you don't want to lose or give away your power.
Absolutely. Okay, so here we are. It's 2019. Stuff's changing in our world. I know, obviously, you're heavily invested in the real estate world. But let's just say real estate went away for whatever reason, or you couldn't participate in a real estate business. Where would you spend your time, efforts, resources? Like what other business, if you had one, and you could make this up on the fly. One of my favorite guys that I learned from is named Adam Robinson. He says, the thing is, I never know what I'm about to say until I say it.
All right.
Because I try not to pre-think it. So I want to give you permission there that's okay. But let's say real estate wasn't on the table for you. What's Chris Heller doing going forward business-wise?
I think it may be a couple things. One is I would look for a business that I would start or own. That was something that I had interest in that I could scale. And I have no idea at this moment what that would be. But the other thing I would do is I enjoy helping in consulting or advising other companies and other entrepreneurs. And so I think I would find a way to do that on a bigger level. And it wouldn't have to be real estate because, I recently had this conversation with someone that said, well, you don't know anything about, this part of the business. I said, you're right, but I know how to create processes. I know how to build accountability. I know how to assess where the choke points are and the problems and come up with solutions. So that skill set is transferable, to any industry or any job. And so there's a lot of companies and entrepreneurs that I would love to help and assist. And then also sales, just straight sales. There's so many sales organizations out there that that could be so much better that that I would want to help, whether it's their call center teams or whoever they are.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things I believe is that if you can learn to run a really great real estate team, you're essentially giving yourself an education in business, and you could go run many other businesses and really learn from there to have any sort of business you want.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Chris, number one, I appreciate you personally. I appreciate your time today. Is there any parting shots that you want to share before we sign off?
No, I think, look, this is, hopefully whoever listens to this gets something out of it that's beneficial or useful to them. And I think that's really important for all of us to keep looking at ways that we can keep continuing to grow and learn. And so I guess that's the parting shot. Don't stop learning and growing.
Awesome. Chris, thanks a lot, man. I look forward to seeing you and talking to you again soon. And Next Level podcast listeners, thanks a lot for listening in today. Share this with somebody because I know that Chris just dropped a bunch of nuggets. I can't wait to go back personally and take my notes on it. And so just thanks a lot, Chris. I appreciate you, man.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you guys later.